Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Seher Gatas. I'm SVP Data Stealth here, and we're really kind of part of our culture code is customer comes first. Customer is second nature for us. We wanna enable you. We wanna empower you to take the right decision and be prepared properly. So, just to give you an overview on who's Data Stealth, so we are in the discovery, classification, and protection business. We secure data. So we are a DSP platform. But that's not the reason why we're hosting the webinar today. The reason why we're hosting this webinar today is that on March 31st, 2024, the PCI DSS 321 kind of officially retired and PCI 4.0 was announced. So I asked my co-founder, CTO, Derek Shanks, to join the call today and be able to kind of give us an overview of the PCI 4.0. I have a lot of questions for Derek today so that we can actually drill into more details. By the way, we have a lot of large enterprise clients in the banking, telecoms, insurance, and other industries as well globally. So, Derek, are you ready to start?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. Just before we start, one final thing. I just want to make sure everybody knows this session will be recorded. So everybody, if you're asking questions, just be careful of that because the session will be recorded and the recording will be sent to all participants moving forward. Derek, if you're okay, I want to just, before we start the session, I want to move you virtually to our kind of coffee room here, if you're okay with that, so we can get more casual in our conversation. Question number one. What is the largest, most impactful requirement that you see in the PCI 4.0 requirement?
So there's, and originally usually I talk about two requirements, and I was thinking about this, I'm going to add one more in. So there's three requirements, two that I think today we'll probably focus on. The first is there is a requirement change in cardholder data environment that now requires you to prove that environments don't have cards. Previously, you would say this system doesn't have credit cards in it and it would be out of scope. So there is a discovery process that happens now to prove cards are not in environments. It's a 12 requirement. I would suggest, if you process cards, you probably want to take a look at it. But the other two that I've been speaking most about that are not well understood, not well communicated yet, are 643 and 1161. So 643 is inside of the software development section and applies to how you do development, and 11 is under the operational sides and part of monitoring. The interesting piece with these two, just at a high level, is New Zealand some years ago, probably 3.5 years ago, started to introduce a requirement for merchants to meet these. They started calling it a SAC A plus, which is not really a real level. They added it to the SAC A requirements. So we have been speaking to and solving this for a couple years now. So a lot of the discussions I've been having around these requirements have been our experiences with dealing with them, not so much trying to educate people on what they are, but a lot of, here are the things to look out for. And hopefully that's what I'm going to be able to share today.
Beautiful. Thank you, Derek. By the way, questions are already coming from audience. Just want you to know, which is amazing. There's just a question to clarify the card discovery, the CHD requirement. Which requirement is that? Is it number 12 or?
Yeah, and if you bear with me for a second,
Sure.
It's interesting. I can remember almost all of the requirements, but this one catches me every time. It is 1252. I believe.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. It's a slight change in that it used to be a requirement where you would define the CDE, and it's now you have to prove that a connected system is not CDE. So for those that are asking, because there's a couple that came in with those questions, I'll get a bit more detail on those and we can follow up with that afterwards.
Absolutely. Thank you. And also another question came in. We'll follow up with the full 12 requirements. So I don't want anybody to worry about that for Christopher and Nadine. Thank you, everybody, for asking questions. By the way, more people are dialing in right now as we speak. Derek, I hope you're ready. I would like you now to elaborate more on those requirements from a high-level perspective.
So 643, I mentioned it's a development requirement. It falls under the Section 6 area. What is unique about both 643 and 1161, and everybody should be aware of, is these requirements were added to all scope applicability levels. So they did not change what a SAC-A or AEP or any of those are. They just simply said, we're going to add these new requirements to everybody. So if you process, store, transmit, work with a third-party service provider, anything, these requirements now apply to you. So 643 is the requirement that for the page that leads up to and the page that contains a payment process, and I can elaborate on that in a second, you must ensure that all of the scripts that are on the page have been authorized. They have to be justified, where justification is to, they actually elaborated on in the requirements in the guidance. It specifically says you must define why that script is necessary in order for the payment to process. And you need a means in place to ensure the integrity of that script going forward. This is a tough one. It's a bit ambiguous in that it just talks about scripts. It doesn't explicitly say inline or third party or anything like that. It just globally says scripts. Requirement 11 is the operational side of this. So 6 is the changes you need to make to be able to ensure the integrity. 11 is all around ensuring that they didn't change. So reacting to the integrity side of it. So if there is a modification or a change to a page, you need processes in place to react to that. The interesting part of 1161 is it specifically calls out that it is the content as delivered to the browser. So this is shifting where this integrity check or this verification is happening. It used to be you would do integrity checks of your content on disk and ensure that it hasn't changed. They're realizing that because of dynamic content and fourth party scripts that are getting injected, this needs to move up. So now it's what the browser got, not what you think you sent. And they also included headers. So this is pushing it not just to page content, but also what are the security headers? What are the headers in general that got sent? And you have to identify any tampering.
Okay, I get it. And that's why I'm thinking in the beginning when you spoke about the 643, like how hard it is. Maybe, I'm an enterprise, large organization. I have my dev team. I'll just maybe plug in a script that watch the other scripts, but I can see there's a little bit of devils in the details in the 643, how we're explaining it. So
And if you're okay, there's actually a great question in the Q&A that I think I want to just touch on because I was pretty high level on the last one. So the question is around who's responsible, especially if you use a third-party service provider. It's a little ambiguous at the moment. It needs some frequently asked question clarifications from PCI Council, but the wording is that the page that leads to the payment page. So in their interpretation, if you use a third-party service provider and you are using a script loaded from them, the page that is invoking the script is in scope. If you have an iframe, the page that houses the iframe is in scope. So you're essentially taking that item and moving back one. The interesting part of the who's liable under PCI, it actually turns out that both are. So payment processors and third-party service providers are going to be responsible for the content, the scripts, and the frame that they're serving to you. But your housing page, the page that calls it and leads up to it, is responsible for making sure that the right third-party page got called. So both parties are responsible. And that's why I think, I've been trying to raise the awareness on this particular requirement because it is affecting everybody. If you're using a third-party service provider, they got you to a SAC-A, you're still in scope. This is still going to hit you.
Amazing. So thank you for answering.
Yeah, so coming back to the 6 and how hard it is, it actually, from experience, turns out to be complicated, and it gets deeper and deeper the further you start working through it. So scripts that are inline in the page, no problem. Thanks for the question. Scripts that are in the page themselves, you can't use traditional browser resource integrity methods to check them. Scripts that are injected by another script. So I load a page, the page loads a script, that script loads another script. That second script also needs the integrity check. And a lot of the browser abilities to protect that aren't there. So it looks easy when you start. And then when you actually start to peel apart a page, you start to see how much it's going to be and how much work. And you also have to keep in mind that this is checking from the browser side, not checking from the server side. So anything that you could do as you're on the server side preparing the page isn't what they're looking for here.
So I'll ask just a clarifying question. Browser side, that's the page that will be served to my consumer, my clients. So I'm responsible for that part right now as well, not just the server side.
Right. And if we look at the rationale behind the changes, there have been some breaches around third-party scripts being loaded from other sources. And an example would be I use jQuery as a library because it's a great JavaScript library, and it includes third-party menu because it has some features and it's loading from GitHub. And if that GitHub repository were to be compromised, your jQuery is going to load that compromised code and bring it in. So it's the cascade effect that starts to become the dangerous part that they're looking to, to make sure that there's security and controls in place to block that.
Interesting. So Derek, I just need to be transparent here. Clearly, the 643 is not a lot of fun. I'm personally scared to ask you, but tell me more about the 1161, like how bad it gets after that.
So the 11.1 is, from experience again, is the trickier one. There's two parts to it. First, the mechanisms that are traditionally in place from a browser perspective to say, tell me that a script has failed an integrity check, tell me that something's happened, they fire every time it fails. So if you think of your application and you have tens of thousands of visitors an hour, more hundreds of thousands, when something changes, you go from no messages to tens to hundreds of thousands of alerts. So it becomes a flood, and trying to react and deal with that flood of incoming data is difficult. On top of that, you need people that are able to react to that. This is an operational requirement. You're required to show how you're going to. The requirement itself currently, just to kind of back a little bit up on that, is at least once every 7 days, you have to have scanned to identify change. But if you dig a little into the 643 wording, and this is a little bit of trying to interpret what the intent here is, this needs some clarity as well. All of the items in 643 around how the guidance suggests you address this indicate that you should use mechanisms that block the page from loading. And then 11 is saying, well, you have to detect if there was a change. So it's sort of implying that you should be blocking that page from loading and then checking every 7 days if it changed or not. As a person operating a website, as a merchant, I don't think I could wait 7 days to know that browser requests aren't working, that people can't do payment processing. There is a window of time right now that I can run it in monitoring and not actually block the page potentially, as long as there's a way that you can do that. But in March of 2025, as this moves forward, depending on how the clarification comes, you might be blocking pages and not allowing them to serve. So the every 7 day is great, except, could you live with not being able to have customers buy stuff for 7 days, right?
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the other part of 11 that is of the larger part that you realize after the fact is the change management. So incorporating this monitoring and the change into your change management, especially when you incorporate that it's supposed to block the page, these become critical issues the minute they change. And if you haven't brought this back through a whole change management process internally, You're going to production roll out a change, nobody's going to be able to do a payment process, and then you're going to scramble to get them in place. And that's where we're, trying to help people get ahead of that.
Amazing. And I know, like, even traditional IT, change management is a big part. So clearly, how I hear this, Derek, is that the 11.6.1 is actually more complex than the 6.4.3, even from an operationalizing this model. So the big question right now, I hope you're ready for it, is what would you propose, suggest large organizations or even mid-sized organization do, and what would be the solution around that? Like, how can we help with that?
So we're obviously talking today because we have a product that can solve this. I think first, we offer a product that covers both the requirements and provides capability for both the requirements. But the more interesting piece and the more exciting piece to me is we offer a service that does this as well. So Data Stealth is a PCI service provider level 1 audited. We're a member of PCI SSC. As you know, I've spoken at the last couple PCI SSC conferences. Actually, interestingly, the last one was specifically on these topics. And we have been doing these requirements for customers in New Zealand for the last 3+ years. So we have a bit of experience on this. So what we offer, what we provide is an onboarding solution that absorbs. You can't get rid of these items. They apply to you as a SAC A, but you can transfer scope applicability from you to us because we're doing them on your behalf. So we provide an ability to put Data Stealth in front of your application, very much like you would with a content delivery network or a web application firewall, and we will onboard you, which is the big part of 6.4.3. It's a one-time onboarding to justify and ensure everything has an integrity mechanism, and then handle the ongoing monitoring that goes with it.
Awesome. And can I read a question that came from the audience right now? What impact will this kind of new requirement have on the third-party scripts? And I think maybe you answered some of it, but if you can...
the requirement actually explicitly calls out third, fourth-party scripts, meaning you need a mechanism in place to ensure the integrity of all, inline first, third, and fourth-party scripts. So the requirement applies to all of them. Yes, you have to integrity check every one of them. And this is actually, and it leads to, part of the later discussion that comes. Sub-resource integrity and content security policies are existing browser capabilities that are able to solve these. And there are some scenarios where we would actually say you should use an SRI or you should use this to check it. The challenge becomes inline scripts don't honor SRIs. So these are scripts that are actually right in the page. And if you have a script block in the page that is loading a third or fourth party script dynamically, you can, on third party, inject that sub-resource integrity. The CSP is obviously going to apply. Content security policies are always good. And then the next level after that, a fourth party script, you're at the mercy of the third party script provider to make sure the SRI is there. The challenge on the inline, if we kind of roll back to why that's an important point, is if I have a page that loads a block of JavaScript that's going to dynamically load a third-party script or a second script, if you're not checking it, even if you had originally developed it with an SRI tag in it, if somebody removes that, if they find a script mechanism to alter that and remove it, then you're basically back to where you were. You don't have a mechanism in place to check the integrity.
Amazing. Thank you, Derek, for answering. Another question, if you don't mind, I want to take also a question from the audience here. Carrie, thank you for asking. What's the ongoing maintenance requirement, let's say, for customers to keep the system up to date through security updates, the business as usual?
So just trying to unpack this question a little bit. So there's two parts to this. There's us staying up to date on the PCI standards and making sure that we're meeting our obligations as a service provider. And we're on top of that. We've got a team that's our primary focus. We've also got participation on PCI SSC, so we're aware of what's coming and can be ahead of that. in terms of customers, and I'm going to answer this in the context of the challenges of requirement 11, which is every time that you do maintenance, every time that you do changes and updates, and I hope this is sort of where you're going with this, there is a change management process we have to work through where you're doing a change, we're supposed to alert or block on that page, and then we get an authorization that those changes were okay. We review them to make sure that they're secure, they're safe, and then we in turn, accept those and then start monitoring based on that. So it's sort of a circular feedback loop of you make a change, we update, we approve, and it goes back. The approval process is not an onerous process, but one of the potential risks of change is somebody piggybacking a malicious change on top of an authorized change, which means we don't want to just say, oh, it was okay, it changed, we'll accept everything. Somebody is just going to go through and say, okay, you changed 4 things, but we see 5. Were you aware of the 5th update? Is that okay? Just to make sure somebody's not jumping in on that. So this is part of the service offering if you use us as a service where we're going to work with you on these changes.
Yeah.
So how the changes are handled. So interesting. There's some options today because requirement is not fully in force until March 2025. We're suggesting all customers today go in a monitor react mode. So when a change happens, we're not blocking content yet. We're actually just recording the change took place, reaching out to you, dealing with the change, and getting our change management process worked out with you before it's going to stop traffic. It's before it's actually a requirement from PCI that the page can't load. So generally the change management process ideally is there's a notification of a change window. We have a notification on our side. We know and expect there's a change. We follow up with you. What happens sometimes, it's not ideal, but it happens is there's an emergency change or you forget to tell us. The change happens. Pretty much right away, somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, something just changed on your website. Are you aware of it? And you say, oh, yeah, we're aware. We're doing a change. And then we would follow up when the change window is done, review the changes and put those into place. As I said, right now, there's that ambiguity around Section 11 around whether they're saying it should be blocked or not and how fast you have to react. There's a 7-day window right now. So we're trying to prepare for the eventuality that PCI is going to say pages must be blocked. And we want to make sure that everybody, all of our customers, everybody we're working with is ready for that with change management processes internally. So I hope that covered it for you.
Sorry, thank you. I hope that covered it for you, but please keep the questions coming. By the way, while we're doing this, there's more questions coming. I really like the engagement here. Okay, Derek, I'm going to ask you the question now. Yeah, I think I got the thumbs up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm as an enterprise client, what other options would I have? So I totally get it. Data stealth, we're service provider level 1. We're not just a platform, we're actually a service provider. So we have the team and the platform bundled to help you with this journey. As an enterprise client, I like just to understand what other options would I have with that.
Yeah, so there are my recommendation, and just to make sure, it obviously I'd suggest our product. If you don't choose to use Data Stealth, I would suggest choosing a product. There are some other script-based products that are out there. I would suggest you use one of those to help cover the requirement 6. Should you choose to build something internally, adding things like content security policies and SRI tags and things like that is good security practice. So not suggesting that we don't do that at all. But trying to build your own for the detection and change, you do run the risk that your product, which is supposed to do this, now starts to come into scope for your PCI development processes to make sure that somebody hasn't changed your internal product to not find something that they've added as a compromise, right? So you can see you could actually bring yourself more into scope by building it yourself. There are other products, and I want to call out that difference between product and service. As a service, we are providing an attestation of compliance and a roles and responsibilities matrix to transfer applicability of 643 and 1161 to data stealth. If you're choosing to use another product to put something in place, it will assist you with the 643 and the 1161, but you are taking those on. And yeah, excellent comment there on scope creep. The danger of starting to bring this in yourself is it is complicated. We have an entire team and product built around this, and it can creep internally. The other place that we've seen this in the past is where multiple applications are doing payments. So you create a service internally as a payment processor, and you essentially turn yourself into a service provider inside of your own organization, and you can kind of end up with the same scope creep there. So those would be my suggestions, you know, for what they're worth. But yeah, you could choose some of those other products. There are some things out there that will do that scan every 7 days and see if there's any changes. Just not really seeing that they're going to get you where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even with those answers, I still like, I think one of the things we need to think of as a large enterprise is the change management, even after managing the scripts. I think I got another question, if you're okay with that. So you mentioned integrity checks. I also wanted to learn about some other specific responsibility within the third-party service to process payment. So how would you manage your third-party payment?
So, Christopher, just if you can clarify, are you looking for data stealth managing our third parties, or is the question in the context of you managing your third party?
And here's what I can do. While Chris, I will, if you're okay with that, Chris, I'll just maybe unmute you. Give me 1 second. I think I can do that. Yes, I think I can. Okay, Chris. I think the floor is all yours.
Okay.
So I just wanted, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, are you asking the question of data stealth and our third parties, or for you in terms of transferring the liability over to your third party service provider?
The last one. So
Okay.
if you have your third party, you don't want to take on all that risk in terms of managing your network, what is flowing in there. So you transfer this risk to a third party provider. So what is exactly you need to do just in case something happens, at least you can, you are not so liable to all those things.
Got it. Thank you.
So unfortunately, there is only, you can get yourself through the proper development setup, through the proper application development to a SAC-A if you're hosting the website. The only way to actually transfer everything completely would be to choose a third-party hosting provider and transfer over. You are still assessed as a SAC-A, and you will still need to ensure that those things are in place, but you can transfer that ownership to somebody else. But because you're the merchant, because you're the one that has the relationship with the issuer, the payment processor, it's essentially still your responsibility to cover these. So that's why I said the key here is not about getting out of scope. It's about finding ways to transfer scope applicability to a third party. And that's where that service versus product is really critical. Transferring scope applicability of these new requirements to somebody else gets you back to where you would be today as a SAC-A. And yeah, you can go a little further, but it does actually involve somebody else hosting. And it's not just hosting, it's all the change management, the application updates, everything like that would need to move to someone else who would be willing to take that on. So unfortunately, there's only so far you can actually go with it. And so I see a hand up. Do you want to just finish that one just so we close off on that?
So in this case, you don't want to be hosting the data as well. The hosting and everything is with the third party. The only thing, the customers are our customers. It's just that when they want to make a payment, they go through a third party site to make that payment. So we don't have any data flowing on our network or anything like that.
Okay.
And just a little bit like what else is left we have to do just to be sure.
Okay. So I think I follow. The requirements are a page that leads to the page. And don't take it literal, because there's some interpretation on how to take that. But if I have an application that produces a cart and for a checkout, and I take that cart in its entirety and I transfer it to a third party who starts the payment process, there's no step in between. The current requirements, and I would caution that you don't build a process around this in case somebody changes it to the page that leads to the page that leads to the page. But at the moment, if the page that you put the cart together transfers to another page that says, would you like to proceed? And that would you like to proceed transfers on to the payment process, then you've kind of shifted the responsibility to that piece. And if you got somebody else to host that, there is probably a way that you could argue that you've transferred all scope applicability for moving that piece across. But I hope I'm clear on this, that it's really hard, short of going to a third party like a Shopify or something and moving everything to them, and having their store and their hosting to actually get fully transferred across.
I got a thumbs up from Christopher, so I think we hit the mark there. Thank you so much, Derek. There's another question coming in. I know your opinion on this one. I'm going to ask it. It's coming from Shane. But I'm going to ask it. It's more about AI, machine learning, and all those kind of things from a road mapping perspective.
Yeah. So I'm old. We used to call AI machine learning and training back in the day. There are ways from a processing perspective. We have capabilities to plug in AI. Should be aware that in mainstream business flows, anything that you add, like a call out to an AI engine or something to actually evaluate, adds overhead. So if you're looking at transactional things where you need to process with speed, you kind of want to stay away from those to be able to keep up. It has uses in areas like processing call recordings after the fact or transcripts to be able to pick out data. But most of the time, if you're looking for sensitive PCI data, credit card data, it's easier to actually just find it than to try and ask AI to find numbers for you. So performance-wise, so you can do it. We tend not to see that rolled out very often. The human involvement interaction part of the question in terms of the call center is actually the interesting one. And this actually moves off to a different area of capability we have around inline tokenization. We do have capabilities for tone and voice protection on SIP for call center. It's a bigger setup. I just, to be transparent, that's a much larger setup and deployment from a DSS perspective, but there are some capabilities to help in that area. So if somebody's got a challenge around that, I'd suggest another call direct to go over those.
Absolutely. More than happy to follow with up chain. Okay, Derek, are you ready for the next one? Sure. This one is coming from me, not from the audience. Okay, for everybody on the call today, we heard a lot. And what do you suggest? Because it's overwhelming, it's complex. Let's be honest. There's a lot of preparation required. So can you walk us through maybe what's the next step? What's the first step we need to start with at an enterprise organization to start thinking and tackling this big challenge? So
regardless of whether you use Data Stealth or another product, the key message I would have is get started today. Get started today on requirement 6. The onboarding of 6 is a fairly big item. You need to inventory and identify all the scripts that are loaded in the payment pages that are applicable. And I call them payment pages, even though you might use a third party. The page that leads to the payment page is a payment page, right? In this context. So you need to start early in identifying what script is in the pages. What are you actually calling? If you use Google Analytics, are you going to be able to provide a justification to an auditor or to PCI Council that Google Analytics is necessary in order for your payment to process? Because if the answer is no, you've got to find a way to get it out of there. If you're using Data Stealth, we have capabilities to remove those scripts from the client side without you doing any changes to the page. So there's a number of things that we can do to help on those. The other thing that you need to figure out is how you're going to integrity check each of those blocks as they're making it up to the client side and what you're going to do. And if you're doing this with a product and you're going to have to make changes, you need roadmap, runway. You need to get it on a product roadmap and get the development done, because it cascades, as I mentioned earlier. It turns into a fairly large problem. The other, if you're going to do this yourself and you're looking for requirement 11.6, starting to figure out that change management process and the staffing side of this, how you're going to react when an issue comes in, who's going to own that, which division, which team, what is the process for responding to that? You don't want to get into a situation where there were thousands and thousands and you ignored them because there was a change and it turns out that there was something malicious. So my number one recommendation to everybody is don't wait. Yes, it is not a requirement until March 2023, but it means that even if your audit is later in the year, it is a requirement on March 2023. So if you're audited this fall, next March, you've got to have something in place, even if it isn't until next fall that you're going to get an audit.
That makes perfect sense. But I like the places on how we do that. Okay, I think there's another question here.
Yeah, I keep using the term. So the question is, what do you really mean by the page that leads to the payment page is the payment page? And I know I said, don't get hung up too much on the wording. The intent of this and the wording and the guidance basically indicates that the web page that is taking you to or initiating the payment process is the attack vector. So if I have a web page that has an iframe, the web page that houses the iframe is the page that leads to the page. So the outer page is the risk, because somebody could alter the target of the iframe. They could load different scripts. They could try and inject something that's going to interact with that iframe and change and scrape card data. So that's what they mean there. If you're using injected JavaScript that loads the iframe, that page is the page. If you are using a process where I click next and do a redirect, the page that drives the redirect, but not always, becomes in scope. So usually this gets a little complicated, and I spend a lot of time, and our team spends a lot of time here with customers just running through the process flow and saying, okay, so for you, this is the areas that are in scope. Here are some opportunities that you could actually minimize the impact of this change. And here's the pages that you're actually going to have to put the integrity checks in for. So it isn't your whole application, but you're probably, that best case, you're only going to get one page, but a lot of people are seeing, 2-3 pages plus all the scripts.
Derek, just want to let you know the reaction from Christopher is, wow, thanks. So, I think I'm glad actually that the audience are asking the right questions, because it is a big change we all need to be ready for, which then brings me to my next question. So let's say we have a lot of people, by the way, attending today, and this recording will go out to others who register. For those who are interested, so what is really Data Stealth offering, and how does it really work? I know you touched a little bit on that early in our chat, but can you go maybe a little bit deeper and how it will be deployed as well?
Absolutely. So Data Stealth is and I hate using the term because it's so much more sophisticated and capable, but essentially it is a web proxy. It is deployed very much like a content delivery network or a CDN like Akamai or Cloudflare or Fastly. We work with all of those. So we have customer deployments of every content delivery network, both in front and behind. And the change to deploy Data Stealth is updating DNS entries. If you're using a content delivery network, you update your origin to point at Data Stealth. If we're in front, you update your external DNS to point at Data Stealth. There are ways to segment that traffic, so not everything goes through Data Stealth. I don't want to see, or I don't want to help on every page because we have nothing to do there. We really want to focus on the payment pages. So there are some ways to limit how much goes through that process. as soon as we're in line, we can start helping with the script inventory, because we're able to capture some of that stuff automatically, and we can start to do the integrity checking setup. There's no application changes. Occasionally, we will talk with you about application changes you could do to make things better. But if you're dealing with an application that either you can't change because you can't, or you don't have the time window, we're able to enact all of the changes required for the client side of the page without you making any changes. So that means, going back to my example of Google Analytics, if you have Google Analytics in the page and you can't justify it's needed for the payment, either you have to take it out, or if that's not possible right away for any reason, we can take it out. So we would verify that it's there, the page wasn't tampered with, and then we would take it out on the client side, so it's not part of the justification because it's been removed. Right. So, and we can do that process. We have mechanisms to handle third, fourth, fifth, sixth, on and on party scripts to make sure that they are all flowing through. We have abilities to do the integrity checks that don't block content while we're still allowed to do that, meaning, the page still works, but you get alerting, which is different than something like an SRI or a CSP, which is going to stop the page. And then we can actually add the SRI tags and the CSP tags for you moving forward, again, trying to help manage some of that change.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So, I'm going to ask the question again, just to make sure we're all clear. So there's no changes in the application, no change in, in anything. Actually, the user workflow, either the clients who's browsing to our website to do the payment, nothing changed on their side as well. Did I get that right?
That is correct. Yep. And just as a side note, and I won't drill into this here today, but if anybody today has an actual payment form where you're accepting cards and you're up in a SAC-D or in that range from an applicability, we have some things that we can do to help take you all the way to an A that also don't require you to do changes to your application. So if anybody's in that situation, please reach out to us and I can help with that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And definitely we'll reach out as well while we're sending this recording to make sure if there's more help needed. I have two more questions. We have still 15 minutes left. First of all, thank you so much. A lot of information, especially the 643. Now I get it that we need to start there. Clearly we can help, others can help. But you mentioned that 11.6.1 is more challenging. So what solution do we have for the 11.6.1? I believe you touched a little bit on that. Can just share deeper.
So through the experience of dealing with this with our New Zealand customers, like I mentioned earlier, over the last 3+ years, we've put a process and a team in place to deal with these. So we have a monitoring system that is designed not to generate millions of or tens of thousands of alerts. It updates the state of a page. It tells us where we're at. We have a customer service team that knows how to react with those and get changes across change management processes to integrate to get those changes in. And we have the team that is part of our level 1 audit that allows us to transfer that scope applicability of 11.6.1 from you to us, right? So it's operationally, what we have here is a several plus year head start on operationalizing this, and we have the staff that are able to do this. So generally speaking, everybody on this call today, their primary business is not credit card page integrity checking, and they have other business that they have to do. This is our primary business. So we have a team that's dedicated and focused on handling this.
Beautiful. Deployment, is it like a hosted managed? Is it on-premise?
Yeah, so from a hosted, we offer all of the above. So if you're looking for Data Stealth as a product, it's, it can be hosted managed, it can be on-prem, it can be cloud, it can be any of those. If you're looking for Data Stealth as a service, we have on-premise, cloud, and hosted options for all of those, but there's some nuance to that in that even though it can be in your cloud tenant or in your data center, we provide management services for it. And that's how we're sort of able to carry that back over to us from a scope applicability.
Beautiful. Let me see if there's questions coming in. I think there are two here.
So the first one, and I'm just looking at it here, so if DataStealth is implemented as a proxy, in an iframe implementation, you see the parent page, the one that houses the iframe, and the third-party service provider. So the question is, will DataStealth look at the third-party service provider page in this configuration, and would we see the CHD, which is true, because in that case we're level 1, we would see the card come through. So the short answer to this is generally no. Because you're separating the responsibility, we would not be responsible. We could if you wanted to, but you and DataStealth are not responsible for what's inside the frame. So we would see the target source location that the frame is asking for and see that it's, a third-party service provider, but we're going to let that just go to them because it's their responsibility. Interestingly, we're probably having a conversation with that third-party service provider today to provide the same thing we're talking about today for the inner content of the frame. To your point, though, we do a large amount of data tokenization services in scope reduction as well. So customers that are a SACD today and are taking card, the same process deployment allows us to tokenize before it hits their application. And that's where we're going to see cardholder data. So yeah, we have an entire environment built around the fact that we handle cardholder data. When we built the product, before we started anything, we met with auditors and security experts. We designed the environment as a hardened environment from the beginning and then built on top of it so that our audits wouldn't be complicated and difficult. They're, they are difficult audits, but they're not as difficult as they could be.
Awesome, Brian. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I hope that answered the question. There's another question, I think, around a single page frame.
So single page applications in Angular. The only thing I can say is I'm sorry. Unfortunately, if you're using an SPA or using Angular, and it is building the payment frame injection, your entire SPA is in scope. So for those particular deployments, we're actually having to integrity check the entire application SPA, everything. So it's not an ideal situation. There are some things that we can do that we've helped customers with that essentially allow you to introduce and take advantage of the page that leads to the page concept to actually carve out a little bit of that in a separate page that we're able to do the integrity check on. And I'm not doing a great job of describing it, but if you have an SPA, this is a big deal for you because changing a copyright notice in an SPA application rebuilds all of the scripts, which means all your integrity checks have to be done over. If you're using an SPA, there's probably a tremendous amount of dynamically loaded script content. All of those have to be checked as well. So yeah, this is, it's a little bit more complicated for you if that's the case. We have quite a few customers that use SPAs today. So I'm happy to talk through, even if you're not going to use DataStealth, I can talk through what we've helped customers with in that area. And maybe you can take some of that away and do something with it. So the next question is, what do you recommend for integrity checks? So this is the challenge in finding a solution. There really is only one mechanism that is available today that doesn't require another product, and that's essentially taking advantage of a browser SRI tag, sub-resource integrity tag. So essentially what you do is you say, this is an integrity check calculation of the script, and if the browser loads it and it doesn't match that script, it just won't execute it. That's really your only choice. There are significant limitations on SRIs in terms of what it can apply to. As said, it can be applied automatically to direct scripts in the page with the tag. It can be applied programmatically, but then it starts to become easier to remove to third party, and fourth party and on gets more difficult. It doesn't work for inline scripts. The other part of the integrity check SRIs, which for me has been a security concern, your browser wants to load a web page. The sole purpose of a browser is to serve a page. So it will always err on the side of making the page work. So an SRI tag missing, the browser goes, oh, that's great, I'm going to load it anyways. So the vector for compromise is so great around this because all it takes is removing through programmatic or something upstream the SRI tags, and the page is going to load compromised content.
Another thumbs up from Christopher. That's awesome. Thank you, Derek, and I hope everybody's enjoying. My final question to you for the day is, we mentioned like this new requirement only best practice till the deadline of March 2025. So maybe if we can summarize, like, why should maybe other organizations start dealing with them right now? So we're end of April, we're May, so almost like we have 10 months or something to go. So why should we start planning this from now?
So as I alluded to earlier, it's understanding the impact of this internally and the changes you're going to have to make. I have not yet run across a deployment that did not involve something that had to happen to the page. For our customers, it's been great because we've been able to do that for them. But if you're going to go this route and you're going to use a product and you're going to start working on this to assess it, leaving this to the last minute and finding out you have significant changes you need to make or changes in general, you're going to be hard pressed to start hit March. 10 months sounds like a lot of time, but anybody here in IT knows 10 months is, that's like a release cycle. It's not a lot of time. So it's really about making sure that you don't find yourself at the end of this with no runway and no options left.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I will sort of, in the past, PCI has added requirements with a window of time to get you up to speed. It's a best practice until a particular point in time, and then it's a requirement. Typically, in my opinion, when you see that happen, it's because they understand the magnitude of the ask. They understand, and the people that put that requirement forward understand how big this could be for an organization. And my suggestion is take the hint. If the PCI Council is saying we're going to give you a year to get this in place and it's best practice till then, take the hint that this is probably a big deal.
That's a great point, and we know things sometimes take time. And Derek, after you walk us through maybe how complex this can be, or even the understanding of the requirement, the preparation, and especially with the 11.6.1 requirement, which is change management, it's a big thing. I think it takes time in preparing, planning, understanding what URLs, engaging with the right partner, hopefully us, and the right platform, and doing a discovery, understanding the budget. I think it's, as I said, it's a normal life cycle that takes time from an IT or a CISO division as well to do that. I think that was the end of our session today. I just want to say, first of all, to all the audience today, thank you so much. I hope that was a great use of your 1 hour. It's a good investment in that time. Derek, I want to personally thank you. I know how busy you are as well. So thank you for coming and joining us here. Just to remind everybody, Data Stealth, customer always comes first. This is our second nature. This is our culture code. I hope that was valuable for everyone. My commitment is we're going to do more of those to give you more value so that we can enable you as the customer to stay in the driver's seat, especially in those interesting times where there's change happening in the PCI and in the security industry in general. If you have any questions, please follow up with our BDRs or myself. We'll follow up and we can have Derek do a deep dive with your organization. By the way, I'm getting a lot of thank you, Derek, by the way. You can see this on the chat. So thank you, everybody. You will get the recording as well. Looking forward to future session. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you.